This program and its contents are designed for information and educational purposes only. This program does not render medical advice or professional services and is not intended to be a substitute for professional care. The information provided here should not be used for the purposes of diagnosing or treating a medical or psychiatric condition. If you have or suspect you may have a health problem, consult your healthcare provider.
Hi, welcome to Positive Momentum TV. I'm Diane Silva, and today my guest is Lori Sysel. I've known Lori for 21 years now, and Lori has agreed to be on the show. She has some special talents. I call them talents, gifts, whatever. She's great at parenting. She knows how to keep your sanity, stand your ground, and still show that person that you love them and care about them. So I asked Lori to come on because I want to learn how to do this. You know, I always get tangled up in the how. And besides that, when Lori and I get together, the energy gets kind of electrified sometimes. So as we talked about before, I'm going to show my personality, and I asked Lori to go ahead and show hers. And, you know, being the first time on camera, she may or may not. Some of Lori's background is you have 2 children. You've got the respect of mine.
You could say that.
We'll talk about that a little bit. She's also been with Parent Savvy, and so she's got some, what do you want to call, credentials behind you. So she's not just your, and I don't want to say just your, but she goes by June Cleaver. So, Lori, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Well, I've been married for 31 years.
Wow.
We have 2 children. Our son is 28. Our daughter is going to be 20 in January. And I guess I kind of look at life as, if you can't laugh about it, then you should find a way to laugh about it.
Well, yeah, because nobody gets out alive.
Exactly.
So why take it so seriously?
Exactly.
You know, and take ourselves seriously? Does anybody take us seriously? Well,
your daughter did once.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that. Sorry, sweetie.
You love me, right, Angel?
You said we could use this.
Your daughter was a little brassy and a little opinionaed.
Well, I apologize, Angel, but she's still opinionated.
Yeah, she knows that. But when we'd come to your house, I would frequently see her be disrespectful to you.
Right.
And if I'm in your house, it's not my place.
Right.
Well, one day you were all at our house. And she came down the hall and she popped off to you. I don't even remember what she said, but that mom in me, my back went up and I said, "Don't you ever let me hear you speak that way to your mother in my house again. That was rude and you owe her an apology." And she looked at me like she was going to respond in kind. And apparently she saw something in me that made her think twice. And so she stopped talking and she looked right at you and she said, "I'm sorry." And everybody in the room appeared to be just a little bit surprised by that.
Well, I am still. How do you command that respect? And that's one of the things, and that's where I get caught up in the
Well, it's not because I'm bigger than them.
No, but they always say dynamite comes in small packages.
I think that the children live up to or down to your expectations of them.
Okay.
And I think that as parents, sometimes we get so used to our children behaving in a specific way that it's a slow process, but they get away with it once, and then it's hard to fight back up. You can't swim back up that stream. It's difficult to gain that ground again. So after a while, it's easier to just throw your hands up and say, "You're going to do what you're going to do." I think she knew that I wasn't going to do that. Okay. She knew that I wasn't going to accept that behavior from anybody.
Right.
And we were all together about 2 weeks after that, and I used to tell my kids, "I'm the meanest mama on the block. I wear the crown. Don't mess with me." So we were all together, and I had said something about being the meanest mama on the block, and she said, "You're not mean." And I started laughing, and I said, "Of all of the kids in this room,
Yeah.
for you to be the one to stick up for me, that's amazing. And she said, why would you say that? And I said, don't you remember a couple weeks ago?
Yeah.
And she said, oh, I had that coming.
You know, and she won't do that to me, you know, but and this is where I'm astonished, because you command that, and you got that from her, and I called her my freight train. Yes, Angel, you were a freight train. I love you dearly, sweetie, but, you know, she was, like you said, you know, you come at you, and you just couldn't get away from it.
But you always saw her coming.
Yes.
You always knew what was on her mind.
Mm-hmm.
And although sometimes her delivery was not always appropriate,
Right.
she knew what she wanted, and she knew how she felt, and she was going to let you know.
And I really commend that.
I do too. I have a lot of respect for that
Yes.
out of a child, because they have to find their voice.
Mm-hmm.
They need to find their voice. They need to find a way of saying, I don't like the situation, but they need to be trained how to do that in a way that is appropriate.
Okay, so let's take that a minute, because you know, like you said, you got Angel basically from the beginning. You know, you kind of hit her, and I'm not talking Angel, I'm sorry, Angel, we're just using you as an example, I apologize. You do know we love you. But you caught her right at the beginning, so she didn't get the chance to build up to that. Yes, it was different at my house.
Yes.
And I remember being at my house, and she said, you don't need Lori, you don't call Lori, you don't do this for Lori. And I'm like, what? You know, I mean.
Well, but that's because you used to threaten your children with that.
Yes, I did.
I'm going to call Lori, and they would say, no.
You don't need Lori. Yes, I do. But, so how do you gain back your power and still keep everybody's dignity intact? And I think that's the biggest thing, is
It's
making
dignity.
sure.
You're right.
Making sure that child feels dignified and heard and valued and validated. And I apologize to any of my children and all of my children there's no if. I have, I'm sure, made you feel invalidated.
We've all done that to our children.
So.
It happens. But I think the way to, if you've gotten off track, the way to do it is to say, you know what, in the past, this behavior was accepted by both of us.
Okay.
You behaved that way and I allowed it. So you weren't 100% wrong and I wasn't 100% wrong, but the way that we were communicating wasn't working for either one of us.
Right.
But now, as grown-ups, let's have a relationship. And no, we're not either one going to forget what we feel the other person did to us, or but what we can do is, as adults, we can move forward. And I understand how you feel about what was done. Mm-hmm. And if I don't understand, explain it to me, and I will try to remain neutral.
Right.
Which isn't always easy to do when you've got someone coming at you and saying, you did this, or you said this, and this is how I felt, and it hurt me, or I was mad, or I was whatever.
And this could work for all relationships, not just parent-child.
Sure it could. When we were first married, everybody goes through those tricky moments. And,
Right.
and we went to a counselor for a while, and I took away one thing from that I have always stuck to, and that is fight fair.
Okay.
If you and I have a disagreement, let's say you've done something that I disapprove of, or that made me mad, or that hurt my feelings, when I come to you to talk to you about it, if I start saying, you did this, you're automatically going to put up your defenses, and you're going to stop hearing what I'm saying.
Exactly.
You're not going to hear the rest of what I say. But if I come to you and say, when this happened, this is how I felt about it. I was hurt, or I was angry, or you have to put that into your own words, but you have to be very careful not to make you statements. You make I statements.
And that's really hard when we're talking to children.
But it doesn't have to be.
I know. I'm just
When my children were little and they would get in trouble, and all kids are going to displease their parents at some point.
Right.
And, they would come to me and I would say, okay, you go to timeout, or on the very, very rare occasion they need a little swat on the behind. Okay, I know that's politically incorrect, but
life is life.
that's another situation. That's a whole other argument.
Yeah.
But when my kids would get in trouble, once the discipline was over, they were not allowed to resume whatever it was that their activity until we hugged.
Okay.
And I would say, you can't get out of timeout until we hug, and I love you. I don't like what you did,
Right.
but I like you, and
Right.
I love you. And that's how you let them know that just because I think that your behavior was naughty, you're not bad.
Right.
What you did wasn't nice, but you're not bad. And I
Right.
think that sometimes parents get so wrapped up in the moment. I mean, face it, everybody's got jobs and you have a house to take care of and dinner and cooking and cleaning and
Life.
other kids and life, and it's easy to just lose your cool and say, you're so naughty. You can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't do that. You can't tell them, because then they're going to go around believing that they are naughty, and they're going to say,
Yeah.
I'm already in trouble, so.
Right. That, and it invalidates them too, because they don't have any feel-good sense about them.
Right.
I know when I grew up, it was conceited to, it was a wrong thing to love yourself, and it was just the way it was. You're conceited, you're so full of yourself, blah, blah, blah. We don't want them to be so down on themselves that they feel shame all the time.
Right.
There's value in you. Okay, yeah, we all make silly mistakes sometimes, or make the wrong choices, or I don't even know if you want to not put a judgment on those words, but finding a way. Yes, I love you anyway. Even Jeffrey Dahmer, parents loved him. They may not have loved anything about what he did, but they loved him because of who he was.
Right.
So what I'm understanding from you is, you show your children, hey, your behavior was incorrect or inappropriate at the time. It doesn't mean I don't love you.
Right.
And you make sure you show them you
Right.
love them. So what about those times when you're sitting there and you're trying to get the dinner on the table and the homework's done and everything else, and they're, mommy, 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 mommy. How do you handle situations like this? And it doesn't matter what age they are.
Well, yeah, you got to remember, my baby is almost 20.
Right.
But I think that we all have days like that, and we behave inappropriately. Just walk away. Right now, mommy needs to finish cooking dinner. But in retrospect, how I handled certain things, if I could go back and change them, then instead of saying, just go sit down somewhere and let me finish this, I would invite my child into the kitchen and give them something to do. That's what they want.
Right.
The behavior is for attention, whether they get negative or positive attention back. In some cases, to them, it's all attention.
Right.
And so what they are looking for is for you to pay attention to them. And when there's more than one child in the family, or like with us, our kids were 9 years apart in age. So, Emily, when Zach was 9, 10, 11, she was a baby going into toddler, and it was really important to me. I did some searching around to find out proper ways of making sure that they both feel important, especially the older kid, because the older kid is self-sufficient. He's 9 years old, he's 10 years old, he's 11. So one of the things that I learned from, I don't remember where I read it, but it was, you have to give each child their own time, their own special attention. And even if it's not doesn't have to be a big production, it could be go to McDonald's and have a Coke.
Right.
Or go to the park for half an hour. Zach and I used to, about once a month, we would have mom and kid day out.
Right.
And I would give him a list of choices. I'd give him 2 or 3 choices for a place to have lunch and 2 or 3 choices for an activity. So he felt like he was in control.
Right.
And during that time, he had my 100% attention. There was no daddy, there was no Emily. It was all just mom and Zach. And that was so important. Both of us enjoyed those
Right.
times.
Yeah, and like you said, and one of the things I found in being an oldest is you do kind of get pushed out of the way because the younger ones, or help. And I see that even in my own family, my extended family with my grandkids and stuff like that. The oldest, it's not that they're forgotten, it's just the younger one needs more attention.
Right.
Or the younger one, and we've been picking on Angel. Angel was an oldest on her
Yeah.
group.
Right.
So, she had to do a lot of the caretaking of the younger one.
Right.
Until, and then stayed in that role. So there was a struggle between her and I, but who's the parent?
Yes, there was.
So it's still, that right there was a power play. So
Yeah.
when you, and whether it's that kind of power play or other kind of power plays, I can come to mind, I know this 3-year-old who pretty much dominates their parents,
Yeah, we've all seen that.
How would you change or begin to change that behavior?
Well, I think the first thing that you have to do is make it abundantly clear to the child that you are the mom or you're the dad, whichever.
You're the one in charge.
You're in charge. You're
Right.
the alpha.
Okay.
And they are entitled to an opinion, and you want them to have an opinion, but their opinion needs to be presented in an appropriate manner, and that just because they think they should have ice cream for dinner, and that's their opinion, doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen.
Right.
I know someone who doesn't have a lot of follow through.
Okay.
They
I
tell
was one.
they tell their child, if you don't do this, then I'm going to take this away from you. And it never happens.
Right.
And so that reinforces to the child that it doesn't matter what my parent says, they're not really going to do anything about it.
Right.
So the first thing that you have to do, my number one rule, is do not make a promise that you are not going to keep. And I don't care what the promise is. If that promise is, I will take you out for ice cream if you get an A on your test, you better be ready to take that kid for ice cream when that test comes back an A. Or if you say, if you don't stop doing that, I'm going to remove X privilege from you. Whatever that privilege is, whatever it is, and you have to make it hurt. It has to be, you can't take books away from a kid who'd rather sit on the computer all day.
Right.
That's not a punishment. You need to make it hurt.
Right.
You need to make sure that they understand that the reason that you do that is because you love them, and that you care enough about them that you want them to make right decisions.
Right.
And that if they behave in an inappropriate way at home, you can't do that. These are the laws inside the 4 walls of our house, and you have to abide by those. Because if you go out into the world and you break a law, they're not going to say, oh, well, that's okay. It's all right. Next time you can follow the rules. Because that's not the way the world works.
It's supposed to work anyway. It does.
Right.
On
Well,
occasion.
sometimes it works that way.
Yeah.
So making sure that they understand you're in charge, making sure that they understand a promise is a promise, and then even if it's exhausting for you, you have to make sure that they change the behavior. If you're going to ground your kid for a week, you've grounded yourself.
Yeah.
You have to be there. When I was in junior high, I had a friend, and she would get in trouble. And so she was looking for attention. Looking back, even then, I was savvy enough even then because it was blatantly obvious. She was looking for attention. It was her dad. Her mother had passed away when she was very young.
Sorry to hear
She came home from school and found her mom had passed away in the kitchen while she was at school. So she had a tough early life.
Yeah.
But her parents would ground her, and then they belonged to the Moose Lodge. And on Friday and Saturday night, they had to be at the lodge. That's where they went. They would let me come over and spend the night because they knew that I would be a babysitter. They knew that I wasn't going to go out running around, that if she was with me, that we would stay at their house. That's not how it's supposed to work.
No.
If the parent grounds the child,
Right.
then the parent needs to be there.
To enforce
Don't ground them if you're not going to stick around and mete out that punishment.
that. Right. So basically, we're not just parenting the child, we're parenting ourselves in our own way.
Exactly.
And one of the things I've heard is we're not always the parent we want. We don't always get the parent we want. We are the parent we needed. Did I say that right? I am basically, when I parented my children, I wasn't parenting them for what they needed because I didn't know what they needed.
Okay,
I
see what you're saying.
parented them
Yeah.
for what I needed when I was growing up.
Right.
That maybe I didn't get, or maybe I did get and I only got, whatever. I parented the way I needed to be parented.
Yes.
I've heard that.
And
I don't know if that's true.
Well, I think that it can be true. It depends on the parenting that you received. I grew up in a single parent family. And I was born in the early 60s, so late 60s, early 70s, it was not normal
Right.
for women to raise children on their own.
Right.
And I would have people question that. I mean, I remember being a little girl, and a woman would say, "What's your daddy do?" And I said, "I don't have a daddy." And she said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And I said, "Don't be, I'm not."
Yeah.
My mom was the best mom and dad that she could be. And she surrounded us with important people. She surrounded us with her sister and with my aunt and my uncle, who were like a second set of parents to me,
Right.
and with her two brothers and their wives, and with a really good friend of the family and her husband. So I had positive male role models. I
Yeah.
didn't need to go out searching for whatever that's supposed to look like, because I saw it.
Right.
We were with my aunt and uncle a lot. We were with Gilly and Sharon a lot. I saw what that was supposed to be like. So I feel like growing up, although society at the time questioned the single parent thing, I knew that, my grandmother used to say to my mom, "You're being really hard on those kids." And my mom would say, "If I'm not, who will be?"
Exactly.
So we grew up knowing what she expected from us, and we grew up knowing that we were loved.
And you passing that on to not just your children, but any child you've come in contact with, not just mine, but you're working on a book that's talking about different experiences, and I think it's going to be fabulous. And I don't mean to add pressure to you. 'Cause this is going to come out. Because
I didn't even think about it.
This is where our energy starts to change, but we'll save that for the next segment, because Lori has agreed if we have time and content, we will have her back. So we'll talk about that maybe next segment. But that love and that expectation, I think, is where, from my understanding, you have a very solid foundation in that, and you've passed and kept that and passed that along.
Yeah. Well, I made a lot of mistakes. I mean, we've all made a lot of mistakes, and looking back on it, in the dark of night, you sit there and you think of things that you could have done or you should have done instead of what you did do. And I can go back and see the mistakes that I made with my kids. But I passed on to them one thing that they never ever doubt, and that is that they are loved unconditionally. And then the second thing is my sense of humor. They both got that as well.
But that's good, because it just is. There's people out there who are so dry and so serious about everything.
Well, it's one of the little excerpts from the book that I'm working on is, if you walk into a room and you see your kid watching something on TV that you don't approve of, you can say, "Turn that garbage off."
Right.
Or
No.
I walked into the basement and saw our son and his buddies watching something that I thought was brain-rottingly stupid. And I said, "Could you guys do me a favor?" And they all looked at me because they knew, here it comes. I said, "When you're watching this, would you just put your fingers in your ears for me?" And they said, "Why?" I said, "Well, because when your brains rot and roll out your head, out your ears, I would really like it if you didn't ruin my couch."
There you go. And you got your point across in a comical way. They may have still watched the show, but at least they knew where you came from on it.
They knew.
And it
Mommy was displeased.
Yes. And one other thing I would really like to touch on before we run out of time here is you made a point of having mommy time.
That's very important.
Knew it was mommy time. So you want to kind of wrap
Well, we
this
still try to do that. Zach, like I mentioned
Okay.
before, Zach and I and it's tough because my husband was military and, they're gone a lot. He was working the night shift. Sometimes it didn't work out as often as I wanted. But that's just time when you say, "This is just you and me." And
Or
what
just
we
you.
talk about, together stays right here.
That's very important.
Yeah.
And that's not just with you and Zach, you did the same thing with you and Em.
Right.
But you also took time for you.
Oh, yeah.
And those children, all the children that were in your house at any given time was like, okay, it's bedtime, it's this time, it's
That's
this time.
right. That's right. Right. And when it's bedtime, it's bedtime. And we never just shoved them in their room. There were stories, and you can come out a reasonable number of times for a drink of water, or you have to go potty again. But when it got time, I would say the line is that doorway to the bathroom. You may not come past that doorway because this is mama time.
Right.
And mommy needs her rest just like you need your rest. And we played and we read stories, and we have spent our time together, and when you get up tomorrow, we'll do the same thing all over again. But this is mama time, and they respected that. They knew that that was non-negotiable.
Right, and I remember that was really important, those times that you would tell me that Emily was triplets.
Oh, yeah. My mom would call, how was your date today? And I'd say, well, the Emily triplets were here today, because there were times, and you and Chris got a really good taste of that.
Yes.
I remember vividly walking into your kitchen that night or the morning after she had spent the night with you, and Chris looked at me and said, I have a whole new respect for you. I tried to tell you.
The Emily triplets. That always blew my mind. But, anybody watching and having children, whether it's grandchildren, nieces, nephews, and you understand the fact that they have more energy than I think.
Well, that's because they suck it out of us.
Yes. Take ours, take everybody else's, like,
Well, yeah, Emily wore out you and Chris and Mindy and Dana
I think
Angel
Angel
and Tiffany. And
they were all,
and I
everybody
was
zapped.
fresh as a daisy.
So with that, do you want to kind of wrap this up into a nice little bow,
Well, I don't think there's any nice little bow in
Okay,
parenting, because every day is different. Every child is different. What worked with our son did not work with our daughter. What worked with one of your daughters isn't going to work with the other
Right.
one. The whole thing is you have to pay attention to what works for that kid.
Right, and yourself.
Well, yeah, and it's a give and take thing.
Okay, with that, Lori, we'll talk with you again real soon.
Okay.
And thank you very much for watching Positive Momentum TV. We'll see you on the next episode.